Hello, how's it going? Welcome back to the Funk Treatise 5th edition. This week, today, we have um, Caryn Fulda reading pages 31 through 40. Let's see how that goes. Once again, before all that, Caryn, thank you for doing this and reading.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
Caryn, and I will be reading pages 31 through 40, although I'm going to begin at the bottom paragraph of page 30.
Okay, cool. I don't have to do that.
Consider the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon theory. We can take a collected amount of instances and relative points, people, across time and connect the degrees to them with the information and abilities we currently have. With more time, the events of those digits existent within any size of funk influence is going to get closer and or farther connectedly apart, and how y across time, Kevin Bacon, a collection of atoms and or even an unknown description of funk gathered collectively at a points in time with the help of technologies created from itself, we can explain or disprove each other the point of x, y, z, and w by a few clicks of a button or less. So far, to me, and now perhaps us, why and how it got there and the clearer explanations of connections are measurably and collectively closer, and we continue expanding our records on the experiences of the past as we become further futures, presents, pasts into across infinity.
And so, to begin, what I mean there is when you consider like things like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon theory, which we already kind of talked about in the last video because we finished on this paragraph. Um, you've got the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Kevin Bacon is measurably connected to everyone and everything somehow through 6 degrees, and I think it's even smaller these days because of time and doing more things. Uh, and again, I am only two away from Kevin Bacon. But using that as an analogy uh, of how we connect things through time. I mean, it's not always going to be Kevin Bacon. It's going to be different things, like the degrees of how you connected to this moment here. Uh, Eventually, who's to say that we won't be able to follow that process with given enough time and information? Now, we may not be able to do uh, that exactly. But if we were to start now saving all of these moments as like a kind of technological panopticon, but with the less negative connotations, then we would be able to connect everything and anything to each other. Uh, and I think that we're going to eventually start leaning towards into that as a human species or a technological species.
To my observation so far, for everything, all forms of practice, function, and execution don't exactly or necessarily make perfect, but they do observably form patterns of some sort of eventual habit or instinct, and the habitats for those habits, instincts to exist in. We are perhaps the theoretical monkeys with the typewriters, and now given enough time, we have not only written Shakespeare's collected works, but all of the written history, and are somehow understanding what I'm saying now, just as you seemingly are, and using all of this collected information, experience, to do whatever we are able. Whether it leads to more Shakespeare or every version of Shakespeare and what exists beyond Shakespeare, a fraction of all that is now perceptively, prospectively happening, both predictably with chance and also not. A room of monkeys seemingly haven't written any books yet, at least not in a language we recognize, but somehow the chances are statistically there or possibly closer to happening than ever before, and if I put a typewriter in a room with a group of animals or things, that those events would become an observable study and historical data for an exponential amount of information, even if subjectively considered wasting time, as the information is still there to be referenced by the funk. And since time is considerably relative and or beyond, that event could happen either my tomorrow or your yesterday, or anything between or outside our time and or space, and we can now more functionally calculate and share what we've learned so far whenever these things happen or attempt to do so or not.
And so that's where this whole pattern makes habit comes in again. Pattern doesn't necessarily make practice doesn't necessarily make perfect. It kind of makes habit and it makes things happen. And additionally, when it comes to the theoretical monkeys in the room smashing on typewriters, if you've never heard that, basically it's a thought experiment of like if we put monkeys in a room long enough with a bunch of typewriters, eventually they would type out Hamlet or some work of Shakespeare or something, right? Um, and to this day, there's now a study that people did with that. They put all these monkeys in a room with all these typewriters, and not a lot came out of it. These monkeys, just mess around with the typewriter, typing a bunch of monkey nonsense. Now we don't understand it. Maybe it makes sense to them. We can't exactly know for sure, but to us, yes, it was a bunch of gibberish. But again, that was only a small selection of the entire infinite universe. I mean, whether you believe we were monkeys or not, here we are having typed everything and anything in the entire history of humankind. We did that. Not you and I exactly, but we, the royal we, humans and everything. And so, given enough time, who's to say that a bunch of monkeys don't end up doing something, more than eating a bunch of bananas, which it still has its own importance. Um, Nothing against monkeys. Okay. Oh wait, there was one more thing um, that I had to share. I think that's it. Let's move on.
In order to view a 2D or 3D object, you need to be able
What I put there is in order to view a 2D or a number D, like any dimensional object. She filled it in with 3D, which works here.
to observe it from 4D or above, and that is questionably time or the idea of it.
And what I mean there is like you can't view things beyond your dimension. You have to be the next dimension to view back on the shadows of something. Like we're in the fourth dimension, and so we can see third dimensional objects, and we can see two dimensional objects. Um, Debatable if we can see dimensional objects, because even 2D is technically 3D in our world. We don't have anything that's absolutely flat. But any dimension has to look back on the other dimensions, and so we can't look forward yet. Maybe one day through simulation or something, or some technological or even mind advancement or evolution.
Say watching a YouTube video or reading a book is being within the 4D. Currently, we are seemingly unable to access a deeper understanding of its calculations and data needed to view how to observe and or translate all the steps it took from your birth to the end of said book video, and where and when it all happened and how to show it to yourself, ourself, and or others more successfully. I propose it is getting rapidly closer as well as it is already here, there. We ourselves cannot currently physically go back in time, but we can do variations of it. You can remember the past or attempt to do so and find ways to look back into history. Tomorrow, if someone successfully attempts to put a typewriter in front of itself or anything and can successfully record that information, eventually we can recall that past event or attempt to analyze its present and future as it happens and is created. It is also possibly that you can go so far into the future that all this eventually happens again. February 27, 2024. ChatGPT's 4's context window was once 8,192 tokens or a few pages of a book, meaning it would only remember and be able to reference very little of what had just processed or had been discussing. A few months later, GPT-4 Turbo had a context window of 128,000 tokens, which meant it could remember and discuss any point of an entire book with you. Just last week, Google released that their DeepMind Gemini 1.5 now has a context window of 1 to 10 million tokens. Eventually, if given the information, computers technology will be able to recall our entire lives and show, discuss, pinpoint any moment information in history. For reference, DeepMind Gemini 1.5, an AI that remembers 2-minute papers, a YouTube video, compared to the context window of the Funk.
And so what I mean there is like through context windows. Um, Basically, that's kind of a history of for AI technologies and everything. Kind of what they like look back on their memory, and it was like just last year or so. It was so little. Like you could type in it wouldn't remember anything, right? It would remember basic things that you'd have to refeed into it. And then eventually it could remember like a few things that you were talking about in the moment. Like it could memorize like paragraph to paragraph. I remember there was a thing that people were doing where it's like you can play D&D with ChatGPT, but you'd be going through it and then it would suddenly just not remember anything that you're doing. It doesn't remember any of the little characters you're with or what. It just changes all this stuff. And it still kind of does that. But now the context window is let's Google that. What is window of ChatGPT 4.0? Okay, so now it is still 128,000 tokens, or that's what they're saying, and so it hasn't changed. No, it's definitely changed since 2024 because now it can reference like all of your chats. It can remember, like it can go through its own memory and go through things like I submitted my whole treatise, and that's where I'm going through the. That's what TLDR is basically letting a computer program break down what it thinks this treatise is about, and if it makes sense or doesn't. It is still something that is uh, digesting and translating this information in a way. And I wanted to do that through humans and through technology to see the differences and if we could even make a different, tell a difference, and how that's going to evolve over time as well. But even with that, what they're proposing now is essentially like the AI is going to remember. Oh, Apple computers do that now. It basically like you can search in your on your Apple products, basically almost anything. Be like, hey, what was that photo that I took at this one time, or what was that dish that we were talking about that we ate for dinner that one day that we had that date, and it'll literally like go through your entire history of your phone or your computer and figure it out. And so eventually the goal that they're talking about with these things is to have your entire history, like especially medical history, to be able to help pinpoint like problems that are arising so we can more easily see these patterns as they arise, because with the help of computers that's going to be a lot more efficient. But again, that with any technology can be, not even technology, that with anything can be taken advantage of. And so let's hope that that doesn't happen. That's why you and I are here trying to see what we can do about that to make things better so that we don't end up in that situation. I think that's basically all I need to say about that. But the last sentence that I said, compare that to the context window of the funk. The funk remembers anything and everything, and it uses all of that to keep transitioning itself and changing itself into the next Carvana moments. And so the context window of the funk is infinite and beyond. And yep, that.
Links to videos will be in a description.
Correct. If there's any links or anything that they talk about or they mention, put them down below in the videos. And also, there's a all my links for the entire treatise that'll tell you what pages the links are on. But it is updated to the most current edition, and so basically it'll just be a few pages off if you're using that for the old 5th edition.
If you're reading this, you likely can't see me or I you in our physical presences right now unless I happen to be near you or vice versa. But you could imagine it, and the events surrounding those and these thoughts and creations are inspiring this and that, or isn't, and could lead to its happening or not, and the next happenings or not. Repeat, rearrange, repeat, retry, repeat, etc. And the funk both does and doesn't ever get old because it is able to store and reuse its information and repair, destroy, refresh itself, or learn how to access and reaccess all information to somehow or someday apply, reapply itself into an action series of new events, even if it is just the beginning or the moment before things have even begun. There will be infinite ends and beginnings to the string chain of loops of dimensions of time, and everything that comes or doesn't come of from it is relative to this information in some distant, direct, and interconnected way. Saturday, December 7th, 2019. Returning to answering questions from the Internet. Number 238834444, 2388334 OP. Can an almighty being create a mountain it can't lift? And if he can't, is it still almighty? Yes, the intention of an almighty being alone is enough to create three realities: one where it made a mountain it can lift, one where it created a mountain it can't lift, and one where the mountain was never created at all. The Almighty can't interfere with the Almighty without compromising its status. It needs images of itself that lack that quality to interact with one's other self. We are just dialogue, words, and ultimately fleeting thoughts pondering a higher existence. Maybe that helps you. Number 23883-460, 23883-444.
This is me responding to that question on from before.
100%, or whatever the real agreeable statistic is. I say 100% because it makes a lot of sense as to what you're saying. Really, I understand to my own degree whatever actual percentage that may be or become. You have now relayed and attributed that information into the idea and back to it, and you have expanded from these influences. There are omnipotentially, infinitely more real amounts than three realities, unless I am mistaken or misunderstanding. Over time and trial and error, there are all the realities within those realities that you stated as well. One where the mountain is green, one where the mountain is silent, one where the mountain can lift itself, and so on and so forth. And we are in the reality that is currently at this moment. Thank you for your response. March 18th, 2023. Additionally, all three or more of those realities are part of the same funk, multiverses within an omniverse. As further response to this, an almighty being would absolutely be able to create a mountain it could not lift at the time of being challenged or requested. But then if it ever wanted or needed to lift the unliftable mountain, it would be able to do so or make it so, as it is an almighty being or is in the progress of becoming. Within and beyond infinity, 0% is still possible or very likely. We understand that in our reality there is a 0% chance of finding a blue giraffe with wings, that is, until a blue giraffe with wings is found or created. In one moment, the Almighty Being has a 0% chance of lifting the mountain until it decides it can or it does. This can repeat ad infinitum. March 2nd, 2024. As God, my Father, says, it is the only way it is until we discover the new way it is. And then that is the way it is until we discover the new way it is, and so it goes until the world is no longer flat, electricity lights the night, and shoes are no longer tied with ribbons. Emma Stone is Bella Baxter in Poor Things. August 13th, 2024. Even the almightiest of beings still exists within an even almightier funk.
That an almighty being would still be a hold on to whatever it's existing within. Uh, Funk would just be, it would just be another form of funk, and so funk can do anything it wants, anything and everything. It just give it time, and it can do that, whether again through reality or surreality. But also, Poor Things, great movie. I suggest it.
It seems some things that I and others have observed to be used to discredit information or dismiss, get rid of, or not count are actually in a way very important to the decisions and/or events after all. Ignoring unrevealed information by dismissing the further meanings behind the why not is in a way an action that leaves more issues than constructively adds to development, even though ignorance and/or dismissals are still additional developments of happenings. Not everything is symmetrical or has to be. All perspectives and the occurrences of these perspectives are extremely important, individual and collective, and dismissing abstract thought or experience because it is not as understandable or clean as symmetry, resonance, and/or is subjectively, objectively more challenging to interpret, translate, is what becomes observably less constructive and could be experienced construed as harmful, neglective, and/or less progressive towards the funk, and constructive communication, interaction with the funk and each other.
Now, we've been through this multiple times at this point of how when you start to nomit or pruno or what's the other one? Cosmore Abarak or less Abarak, which you don't know these concepts yet to a degree. You know, no mission, right? But when you start to like lean into these things and be like, nope, we're not going to go there. There are some things that eventually we arrive at being like, okay, maybe we should not go there, right? Uh, and occasionally people are going to go there, right? And that's just kind of the way of the way. That's just the way of funk. And that is why it's important to learn when to go back to things, how to appropriately go back to things, how to appropriately like move forward or stop with things. And that's kind of what this discussion is about: is to just inspire us to keep investigating everything, and then share what comes out of that, and how do we what is advancement and how do we advance properly, uh, and what is properly all this paradox and everything. Sorry if you're confused, but that it's all confusing, really.
Consider bias, racism, prejudice, discrimination, and/or other things around that nature. Actions, decisions, etc., that arise from those beliefs or principles are more inspired by the group or individual to make a hurtful choice against someone or something else, and for some reason they currently understand their ideas, beliefs to be the best choice for themselves. In these areas, the idea of yes and could be harmful or destructive, which is why it is important to learn how to understand the importances of who, what, when, where, why, and how to appropriately less yes and if this, then what. So, how do we reach further understanding together of what is and is not hurtful, harmful, or destructive, and how we together can reach subjective, objective progression?
And so, yeah, that's what I was just kind of trying to explain to you. Um, it's important to learn how to yes and appropriately, because if you take things like racism and prejudice and discrimination and stuff and you yes and that, uh, then it opens a complete different ballpark. I mean, like, if you're like, let's use Satan for example. If you're over here, and I'm not talking about like Satanism and stuff, I'm talking about like shaitan, or like just things that are haram, like bad, like negative energy and stuff. And if you yes and these things and you lean into that, uh, like let's use a better example, like murder, right? If you lean in and be like, yes, and I'm a murderer and I can do these things, and this is what I like, and you keep yes and into that, we know that that is pretty bad. We know genocide is terrible. We shouldn't do those things, but people do, and sadly, we have to see these things in order to understand them further. And funk, you can't have freedom without suffering. You can't have faith without doubt. You need both of these sides of everything so that we know what the next step is to, again, reaching subjective progression. Things that aren't hurtful or harmful. And if we even want to do those things, and it's different for each and every one of us, and so it is quite a challenge to, again, suggest love each other. Because it seems everyone who's ever done that sort of gets taken out by the people who don't agree with that. They don't like to love, and so where do we how do we move from that? How do we move forward with that?
What if investigating 2 plus 2 equals 5 and the meanings behind the equation solution, or how to actually make it possible or prove how it is impossible, is more important than dismissing it, or giving in to some sort of feeling that extracts you from the next possible outcome until someone or something else eventually makes or causes it to happen? Wouldn't you want to be the person who could do that? Why aren't you? Say you or whoever indeed discovered an answer, but no one would even consider hearing how or why. How would that affect you? They, I, us, information, knowledge, everything, and/or funk. What if yellow plus shape equals banana is a slang term, and I just offended every one of you? And if so, I deeply apologize. It was in an effort of further understanding. How would we ever know further unless we were or are to experience and learn from those scenarios, whether fact or fiction, real and or imaginary? If you were someone who had given up and had not read this far, then you would exist in the relative directly not or dismissed category of these currently suggested hypotheses. But if you are still reading this and attempting to understand, then these examples and proposals are continuing to expand directly through and beyond you and I until further discussed or not, and or proven correct or not. And again, I or you or time, space, funk are able to do these things in our current realities where everything once was not as achievable before this degree. Again, I am genuinely sorry about the banana thing. I hope you can please choose to forgive me and keep investing in our current efforts to learn. heart emoji. I think about the semiotics of a heart. There are now a universal, though mostly human, pattern and symbol of understanding, love, or liking something to a degree and assists you and I in further understanding connection. Hearts are everywhere, anywhere, and sometimes nowhere. April 25th, 2012, I started a project called Drawbook, which you currently now do or did not know about. www.drawbook.net. And it has so many hearts in it and is full of so much love and more. Less than 3. And currently, as I write this, I am on book 59, and hearts are by far one of the most drawn things.
Hearts may, at this point, be drawn more than dicks. It's a very close match. But that just shows you the balance of the world right there. Dicks and hearts.
It is currently over 13,000 original works of art produced by you, myself, and random interconnected chance events with others. And as you have now or eventually will witness, there are a lot of hearts everywhere. Seemingly a reminder for you and us of the love from the funk, as well as every recognizable and approachable desire to connect with something that seems to lean toward more pleasurable, connecting and or constructive for us within the funk. Loving the moments of being loved as what we want to be loved and as the abilities to share love. Love is everywhere, sometimes more, sometimes less, but you'll find even more of it while seeking and spreading it than when you aren't. March 2nd, 2024, here's some love for Drawbook.
And so, what I'm kind of like just bringing up here is just the semiotics of hearts, the symbolism of hearts meaning love and everything, and that not just hearts have to mean love, really. Um, Anything can really mean love to a degree. All the dicks that people love to draw in the books can mean love to a degree. Um, and so, I guess what I'm not proposing it exactly in here, but I'm proposing it to you now. What this is making me think of is like when we see an atom or something like that, or a description of like a molecule or something like that. I think that is a great symbol for love because that's even though we describe love as kind of an emotion that we feel, uh, love is sometimes associated with being, right? Because if there was no being, then there would be no love. Now, there also would be no hate and everything, but sometimes people associate hate and negativity with the absence of things, like just things not being there. But that would be just nothing. Nothing would exist. Uh, nothing is nothing, except it's something as nothing, which again, paradoxical. I don't know what I'm getting at here, so let's move on.
Cron.com, Culture Arts. Negative are
Also, shout out to Meredith Nudo for writing that article. Thank you again. It means a lot to me. Um, much love.
bad things often get more overall attention than positive or good. If something objectively bad happens, many will observe, judge, and share negative opinions quite quickly before they investigate deeper into what is absolutely good or bad about the occasion. By sharing any of those reflecting negative or positive ideas into thought or reality, they immediately become influential to others, and that drama becomes quantumly, historically recorded as for further data calculation of the overall events as they continue. Does that mean negative is greater than positive? Both, sometimes yes and sometimes no. Negativity, for some reason, is often more dramatically noteworthy and observably more prominent by experience. But it is still, as we understand at this current time, and they may be different for you, a negative integer, which is still scientifically less than more, but can, as history has shown, in some ways and times be measured and translated much more than positive events. In terms of improv, yes and is greater than a no or denial, but no but can be and is still often a part of yes and. So again, yes and is still seemingly at an advantage of positive success, even when experiencing negation or denials, and if I had to express it as potential math equation, I suggest that positive yin reaches above or greater than 50% or 0%, a negative yang is possibly the extension below or less than 50% or 0%, in whatever way possible, and they continuously reach into and out of each other, forever attempting to be 51%, 49%, 1%, negative 1%, or more less.
Uh, the first part of that paragraph, what I mean is essentially like how, for some reason, for humans, we find negative things. Uh, I guess they trigger so much that we have to respond more than good things that happen, which for some reason people do celebrate, but a lot of people often tend to shy away from celebration for some reason. An example that I'm going to give is when you take like the internet, for example, and clickbait. Uh, Most of the time, negative clickbait is going to get a response from someone or something more than positive clickbait is. For some reason, like when if you make a spelling error in something, someone has to point that out, right? Rather than if you did it completely correct, then no one really cares. A story that I guess a parable or something, or really it was a meme that I saw, was talking about how this teacher wrote on a board like the times tables of like nine, and it was like she started off like 9 times 1 equals 9, right? And then 9 times 2 equals 19, and they made that one intentionally wrong, right? And then they did all the other ones right, all the way up to like 9 times 10 or whatever. And then they like turned around and talked to the class, and no one was really paying attention because all they could focus on was the mistake. Um, there was more to that story that makes it, a little bit more repairable, but that's kind of the example that I'm getting at. But I also see how in that example, how it was, should be like, we're trying to fix a mistake, rather than uh, just people being negative on the internet. And you hear that a lot from people who have many followers. They get a lot of negativity more than they get like um, positive support. Why is that? Why do we do that as humans? Um, to be determined. It's just the way the schizoanalysis, and I think we've been into that. Maybe it might come a little later, but essentially, psychoanalysis is the study of like the mind and how it comes to be inside you and internally and everything. Schizoanalysis is how the environment essentially forms that mind, and so that is if we really want change, we have to change the environments as well as ourselves. It has to be this, synthesis and the symbiosis.
Taking from the knowledge I have gained so far, I see the importance of punctuation, especially the question mark. And I would like to share how I personally think Espanol to be so fantastic for deciding to establish the question or emotion first when asking it. For those who aren't aware, in Espanol, when a question begins, you already know it's a question, pero como, but how? Just like that. By expanding upon the end result, question mark, and putting it at the beginning of the equation as an upside down question mark, it becomes quickly understandable in a faster and a subjectively more convenient way of communication. Now,
Just to reiterate that, if you don't know, because you're not reading, you're listening. If you didn't know, if you ask a question in Spanish, or even if you make an exclamation, um, they put either an upside down question mark at the beginning of the sentence or an upside down exclamation point at the beginning of the sentence. So you know what the punctuation is already before you get to the end of the sentence. And you can see that even in these readings, how sometimes they'll be reading a long sentence and it'll change to a question at the end, and then they'll say, "Oh, it's a question," uh, or just other examples like that throughout life. And I'm sure you've experienced something like that as well. But that's why I think it's pretty genius that they put it the intent and the punctuation in the beginning. Uh, yeah, let's keep talking about that.
you know it's a question before you've even read it. Additionally, I have seen examples in games and stories of doing something similar by putting the emotions first. Happy. I am so excited to share this information with you. Lovingly with anticipation. I can't wait to see what we come up with using this information. Questioningly, I wonder what we can do next. To continue, the faster or more positive, constructive, and more easily you are able to attempt to clearly explain an idea or statement to something else, the faster progressive constructive thought and reaching further understanding becomes. But as an inverse, the negative or lesser than is also doing the same to what is above or below it. And like I said, it seems like the lesser than has a way of seemingly affecting or influencing individuals subjectively sometimes more than what we've seen the positive to do. Though again, negative is often understood to be deconstructive and positive as constructive, even though both can result in the other depending on the equation or situation. Mathematically, multiplying or dividing positive and negative is always going to result in a negative, but adding or subtracting positive to negative can result in either side. Multiplying or dividing positive and positive will always be positive, and negative to negative will also be positive. Adding negative to negative will always be negative. Adding positive to positive will always be positive. Subtracting negative from negative can be positive, and subtracting positive from positive can be negative. At some point, we will figure out how to translate the equations between the equations directly and or indirectly, and we are historically on the way to experiencing and eventually understanding those solutions. But also with any correct answer or solution, these equations and results can still be misinterpreted if you don't choose to understand them further or attempt to know them rather than to assume them. If you never learn what someone or something truly intended by, for example, putting an upside down question mark in front of a question, you are in a way failing to understand the knowledge or translations of the funk and are subjectively, objectively freeloading during the greater progressions being created, proposed to you, around you, which isn't wrong, just debatably less constructive. Additionally,
And so, to people be like, "Oh, I can do what I want and everything. Like, I don't have to learn anything." You're right. You don't. You can literally just be a floating object in space and just do you. But now that we're at this point of communication and intelligence and consciousness, uh, again, I am just suggesting let's work together. Let's learn what that means so that we can learn what the next thing is together. Because once we learn one thing and we all are on the same page, then whatever comes next will happen at a faster rate.
if you decide
And that's not always true, though. But it does help. Uh,
you can choose to be dishonest. You can act a different role and convince and influence information in others with your acting and what you decide to do with each mask persona. But with our current social and technological connections, given enough time and study, I believe, if necessary, you or anyone, anything can or will eventually be seen or revealed to be acting, if so, and or you, our masks, personas to be identified. When given enough time, experience, and study, more patterns become observed enough for us to know, understand, guess when someone or something is acting or choosing to lie, knowingly or unknowingly, rather than honestly attempting to attribute to the more constructive paths of progression. So there is every variable between and beyond negative progression and progressive negation, and with time we understand each a bit more and find easier ways to explain, identify, or expose them or not. And each, all, again and again, could be something we don't yet understand or not able to be at this time or potentially any time. It could eventually be PAIHWRTEPU9BQFSDG PLUS
but ear where tepu non Bexfits is plus plus minus lol. Uh, she'll finish that sentence in a second, but what I'm kind of getting at here is the different types of masking that there is uh, now that we are conscious beings and that we can pretend to be other things, that we can lie, we can tell the truth, we can put on masks and act as different things that we really feel. Um, I think it was Oscar Wilde said, "You give a man a mask and he'll show you their true self." Uh, but that's not always necessarily true. Like when you come with like neurodivergence and that type of masking, uh, their their true self is beyond that. The mask that they're putting on is a reflection of what they believe society how wants them to react and respond and everything. And so, is that really their true self? No, it's kind of behind this mask. But then you also have the mask of like the internet and everything. Again, why a lot of people are not afraid to say negative comments and everything because they have a mask on. Um, it'd be a lot harder if, uh, again, as I suggest, eventually we'll find these masks and uh, hold each other accountable or not. Again, the people most likely wearing these masks that don't want to be accountable are the ones who take out the people who are seeking accountability. Because again, they don't want to be taken accountable, and they have a bunch of power to keep that.
And ostensibly, you don't quite understand what I'm proposing, but you have a closer idea because we are currently within our actions expanding directly and indirectly through results between nature and nurture, and the beyond to continue attempting to do so through these communications and experiences, anything that causes them to be, and anything and everything else.
Take a break, drink some water.
Water.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Good call. Have some more. Cheers.
More on acting. The action and or act of acting can sometimes be very enjoyable, both in doing and observing, but only arguably if that acting is genuine and for entertainment or subjective greater positive progressive purpose. If that acting is disingenuous and or purposely decided or used to be dishonest or deceitful, as by a person, group, or thing, and then that action or acting now acts as a negative or destructive deconstructive purpose, and perhaps could be revealed over time to be a lie or misinterpreted as a lie or truth. Actors are playing what they have studied or believed to be reality into a simulated reality, but it is not a purely uninfluenced moment action, so it can also be found, observed to be sometimes be falsely constructed or portrayed through a perhaps unintentional positive or negative lie or simulation we can enjoy, accept, or not. From their actions comes the experience of someone attempting to portray their understanding of the past, present, future, and what we or they have experienced while also setting, relaying an example of history for the future, present, past. It is both a lie and genuine, and only the actor really knows the majority of the truth in their actions. So hopefully they are honest about what they are doing, but sometimes even they don't understand or realize the effects of their influences, whether honest or not, and or intentional or not. Unless they are transparent about their actions, you'll currently never know if they really are being honest or not, because you are not them unless you are eventually able to be, though by that point it will no longer be this current time, but the future, leaving you a very different amount of available options. Both you and the actor are a myriad of truths and lies with enough time and effort, or current truths and or lies can potentially be observed, accessed, questioned, or accused by the entirety of present or future humankind or beyond, perhaps even all of existence.
And so that is kind of more the type of mask that I'm getting at. Like, that, as Shakespeare said, that all the world's a stage and that we are merely the players. And we each, at times, put on masks as we're playing, you know? And do we ever take these masks off to actually be ourselves? Or is this whole stage making us put on a mask that we wear eternally? Is anyone truly true or not? And we'll never know unless we're able to, like, instantly know through telepathy or something like that. Um, there was something else I wanted to say with this, but now I'm kind of blanking. Um, I think that's mostly it. I think that kind of explains itself to a degree. Again, if you have any questions, leave them down below and let's get into it. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your confusions.
Artists, composers, and musicians seemingly make art to be created.
Oh, I remembered. Essentially, what I get at here later is, and I'm going to bring up this word again, and so I might as well define it. So, what a panopticon is, I can't remember who came up with this. Panopticon. Jeremy Bentham. And or Bintum, however you pronounce it. But essentially, what a panopticon is a design of an institution, mostly a prison, in the way that he uses the word, that basically is designed to that any point in it can be seen by a central tower. And so at all points, you don't know if you're being watched or not, but you most likely are. And so now we're in the stage of a technological panopticon. We're always being watched and viewed by algorithms or the things, the apps that we use, or the cameras in our laptops or phones and everything. It's all gathering this data, and we're all being watched. And it's not to a full extent of like this Big Brother thing, like 1984 and stuff, but it could get there. But what I'm suggesting is that funk is kind of like, and I'm going to use a silly fantasy metaphor here, but like Santa is always watching, right? When we grow up, they're always like Santa is watching, and whether you believed in Santa or not, the people who did believe in Santa were like, oh my gosh, Santa's watching. I gotta be careful. And now they have those elves on the shelves that are always watching, and that they send their little Santa spies, and they relay the information to Santa. But that is essentially what I'm getting at. Is like you are always in the view of funk, and so if it ever gets in the history of funk, uh, if funk becomes able to look back on itself and judge, kind of the idea of like when you get to heaven, uh, they judge everything you've done in your life and stuff. Now, whether you believe in heaven or anything, let's just talk about funk in the future. If future funk gets to this point, and we are now subject to this like Truman Show like thing of like these beings or whatever being able to witness our entire lives, what do you do with every moment? How do you act? Do you continue to uh, put on a mask and try to put on a show for these folks that may or may not be watching, or do you become yourself? Are you just going to be and just live with and without shame, right? Uh, and I don't know where to further go with this point, but again, this is mostly. It's not mostly. It's important to just get these ideas out so that you and I can digest them later. Again, it is something that is always going to be incomplete, and that is the completion of it, of building that incompleteness as it completes itself. Uh,
and or not created and then experienced or not to be experienced. Those who experience these creations or lack of creation view, gather, judge, and also create as well, but not to the full extent of artists, composers, musicians, and etc. experience. But they still have a lot to say about it all, regardless of education or experience toward the subject, which is an observation that also applies to artists, composers, musicians, etc. Creators can create or do and attribute to existence with any amount of influence and subjectively, objectively to a more enjoyable degree versus those who simply view and critique existence or art. Artists mostly create physically or in a way you can somehow react with and interpret. Composers are able to write and interpret information as sound in order to more clearly compose, and musicians learn from composers, artists, viewers, and themselves by both mimicry and then possibly advancing to composition, and the same can apply to the artist. However, it seems that the viewer's views, comments, judgments, and critiques are their instrument of choice or vocal paintbrushes and are still their attribution and contribution to the artist, musician, composer, producer, engineer, and so forth, making them artists and creators in their own way. March 11th, 2024. Everyone and everything reacts to each other, creating this influential funk for everyone and everything to continue reacting to.
what's coming to my mind is uh, both in the Drawbook project, um, I started noticing how when I would ask these people to draw, all these thousands and thousands of people, to be like, hey, take a page and draw something. One of the biggest oppositions is basically just like, I can't draw. I am not an artist. Uh, but you are. You are a creator. You are an artist. When does one ever become this thing, truly or not? And I've listened to a really good episode of Philosophize This recently, and I cannot remember the philosopher who talked about this concept of basically like, if you want to be these things, then you become them. There is no uh, real, even though like the example I could give is like, let's say you want to be a writer, right? And you start writing, uh, but you don't believe you're a writer. Then what are you doing? You are a writer. You're writing. Now, that's where it gets into the subjective levels of success. Are you a successful writer? And in my opinion, if you are writing, then you are successfully writing. And then you're just challenge your next levels of success. You are growing as a writer. You are already a writer. And if you don't think you're an artist, do something, create something. You are now an artist. If you don't think you're a celebrity, if you are being celebrated, then that's a celebrity. It doesn't have to be these people that have all this money and power and influence. Those are influencers, not really celebrities, unless you celebrate them, which some deserve it and some don't. All right.
Back to the internet. Number 23883466, Friday, December 6th, 2019, 1241. 23883454. This funk you have intuited has been described in many ways, such as flow or Weiwei, Whitehead, and other processists describe it as the rhythm of experiential discovery. For Bergson, calculus is more than just a handy metaphor, AO analogy, but rather he indeed aimed at framing an approach to the organicist world hypothesis that employs the calculus as its actual method of discovery, i.e., differentiation, and explanation, i.e., integration, and that every discovery is the inverse of an explanation and every explanation the derivative of a discovery. March 21st, 2024.
See, I find that more confusing than stuff that I've written. That's like deep, deep philosophy. Like that's that, again. I'll say it again, and I'll say it before. Uh, my wisdom exceeds my intelligence. I am semi-smart, and I have my moments, but this is the type of stuff that like this is kind of what I'm looking for when I'm asking for like feedback and stuff, because I want to dive into stuff like this. I want to be like, I want to understand that. Why don't I understand that? How do I learn about it? But a lot of people will see that and they'll hear it and they'll look at it and they'll just turn it off. They'd be like, I don't need to know that. That's not going to help my life. And it doesn't. It doesn't. It's subjective.
These are all holons of funk realization's understanding that existed to cavernialistically branch us to where we currently are and are continuing.
And what I mean by that is, um, again, that process of XYZ Kevin Bacon thing. This was a step that got us to this moment. This was from the very first open forum that I had for this treatise, uh, and someone reached back and shared this information, and now those holons of those moments expanded into this one right here, and we can trace that back in the ways that we can and cannot, and we are now continuing from those moments.
From the internet, www.religiononline.org article. The true method of discovery is like the flight of an airplane. It starts from the ground of a particular observation. It makes a flight in the thin air of imaginative generalization, and it again lands for renewed observation rendered acute by rational interpretation. Alfred North Whitehead. A YouTube video and Wikipedia. Alfred North Whitehead. And I'm proposing that you, I, Whitehead, Bergson, and everything are right and wrong over and over until once again it all makes further sense to you and I or everyone, or it doesn't until further notice or not. All of everything over an exponential amount of time, space, reality loops along a string chain of collected branches of observed or measurable, immeasurable length, and the moments of experience and data collection, storage, review of information, and understanding of it all that you and I in the past, present, future understand it to be, have been, and become. Whether you do or don't believe it, we will both individually perish with time, though also exist within the future as influential effects toward it, even though you and I will no longer as physical beings be here or there, but will exist as a part of the everything leading up to and after, whether as particles, waves, influence, and or beyond. The funk is always at times here, there, everywhere, everything, and also nothing. And it does and does not provide for us and or take from us. As of this moment, we cannot provably connect to it as easily as you and I are doing with each other, but the observable patterns of us doing so are forever more increasingly arising as we continue to explore, experience, expand, etc., even though you may understand or interpret it as something different. We are beetles pleading or trying to survive with and or against birds, and we are also the birds making the same arguments to the beetles. Little fish to bigger fish, matter versus time and space. Over time, one or more will always conquer, collaborate, or be in harmony with one another, either by choice or by chance. It is the way we understand many, but not all, natures to be. August 14th, 2024, Thesis, Antithesis, Synthesis. In our current times, we have records that many individuals, groups achieve success within our time or not, ranging from great to small and or none. We also experience a significant amount of loss or failures. To our knowledge of current history, some say Mozart died poor and was buried in a pauper's grave, though this is also debated. Whereas, were he alive now or currently had this level of present and or past success during his life, his music and fame would potentially have been able to keep him alive and contributing for a longer period of time toward the funk. But in our reality, we know it not to be so, unless you are eventually able to prove to me, us, otherwise. Some also argue that to not be the case. What is true and how do we know? What even is success or failure? Around this, our current time, 2019, a banana duct taped to a wall sold for $120,000. What is more successful, Mozart or Maurizio Catalan's Comedian? Both are in a way successful in gaining more and more views, but what will in the end have the most influence and or prominent effect on with the funk, and took a subjectively more time, effort, and experience to do so, while also being subjective or able to be described as similar? One or several of many and all of these answers are correct, and a source points of that collective understanding is here, there, and everywhere within and beyond the funk. And whatever you believe contributes to whatever you believe and expands with everything forever. However, if you were to ask someone whether they knew Amadeus Mozart or Maurizio Catalan, it is likely they're going to recognize Mozart over Banana Tape Wall Guy. So, in my opinion, Mozart wins this round, but that doesn't mean Catalan failed or is a failure.
And in fact, uh, that banana tape thing comes back every once in a while. Someone is always talking about it at this point. And so there is a debate of success in this. Like, I think it recently sold for like $1 million or something like that. And it's just a concept and an idea. It's not the same banana that they tape on the wall. It's not the same tape. And I think it. I don't know the exact meaning behind it, but apparently it's a statement on the current art and everything. And a lot of some folks will want you to believe that that is not art, but it absolutely is. Um, the There's a guy that I enjoy his videos that he shares on Instagram, talking about a lot of like art hate is really just propaganda. It's trying to divide you and make you not appreciate art or think art is lame, so that you basically fall in line with uh, boring, plain things, or things that don't go against things that do go against tradition, breaking tradition. Art is just for the sake of art, really. Like, it's just doing and being and everything. Kind of what I'm proposing here, to just do and be, and be okay with that, and be happy with it, and share that love and everything, and how that affects. And then even through that love, how you will suffer through doing that, because not everyone is going to accept everything that you do. Not even anything and stuff. Sometimes nature and reality don't go the way that you expect. Uh, let's move on.
Saturday, December 7th, 2019, continued. Wikipedia article about a Fibonacci number. Consider the Fibonacci sequence and why it is so prevalent in the nature of the funk around within us. Each iteration continues to grow within, without, and beyond itself. Imagine graphing this sequence. You create an original first point where the sequence to us is so seemingly starts, and you begin to spiral out in opposing directions from the starting point. The spiral appears to be going in a circle around this point, and so far in our present, we are unable to calculate the endpoints in time, besides those we create ourselves. Say you are now on the fifth sequence of the spiral you started. Considering where you started that original point in time, or that official beginning point you set down on paper or on your computer, is no longer at that original location in space-time. You can observe the spiral that you have created, and it is observably in front of you, seemingly a perfect ratio of going round and round, but if you extend this ratio to the point of cavernal time and space where it originally began in the universe funk, and attempt to track and graph it through its spine from then to now, it becomes a potentially 4D graph extended image. Using our data within each of our individual group experiences and branching points adds to the entire selfless, selfish, individual group experience of the funk. That starting point of the sequence is now a past point location in time and space where you and the Earth were, let's say, 5 minutes ago, which is at least hundreds or thousands of miles away. Even though the graph is seemingly still in front of you, the true beginning of your Fibonacci sequence is at a previous point in your hour and its collective spine, or the individual timeline, branching from a starting point of space within its cardinal sequences across time. The entire sequence becomes a much weirder and more random-looking shape, but it is still in essence a similar, same ratio. The graph is just much more complicated and different after being extended into another dimension. It extends out like a spiral, expanding like a cone, and then moving through space-time. Imagine the spiral you started to now be going from your starting point and expanding towards like a cone, extending closer to you with each additional extension, now in the third dimension rather than in the second dimensionally graphed Fibonacci sequence you originally drew or imagined. The spiral cone you exist in and know and understand started at a much smaller point and spirals outward and begins to make a cone-like shape or funnel. As your iterations expand, so do the dimensions of your sequences and cones. Additionally, another circle-like cone extends away from the opposite side of your starting point, becoming larger and larger and farther away. March 22nd, 2024. And when you graph these cones through fourth dimensional space-time from one point to another, it becomes an entirely different shape that would be difficult or conceivably impossible for me to describe to you, though perhaps you can still attempt to imagine it. Cardinalistic frames of overlapping and extending comes from here to there.
I wish I could show you what I mean by that visually. I don't have any paper with me right now. But what I mean by that is, like, let's say you're drawing. I'm going to show you right here. Let's say we're doing a spiral, right? Now, to you and I, this spiral is appearing in front of us. It's not really moving. It's stationary on our computers or whatever you're watching this video on. But in real space-time, uh, the start of that spiral is now how many ever miles away the Earth and has moved through. Right? It is no longer at this point. It's in the past. It's gone. And so, if you were to take your entire like life and beginning from your conception and to like map it out through space time, it's this weird line. It's not this like straight line of just like from here to there. It's this weird, crazy path through time and space that branches off into things. And there's even time and space before it. Right, you're just a branch of all these times and spaces, moving through every Carvanial frame. Uh, and hopefully you can visualize that. Hopefully that makes sense. And I wish I could show you what I mean. I wish I could like make a 3D model. Like I wish someone had like a graph that we could see the path that the Earth was at like a month ago or a year ago, and then show it where it's at in time and space, and then show like the path that it took from all of that to like that future moment. I think that would look really cool. I think that would make. I would love to make an art piece based off of that. I'm gonna save that one for later.
Wikipedia article spine. Picture an ice cream cone. The bottom of the cone is closed. You scoop the ice cream into the top of the cone, and that cone holds your ice cream. You cannot currently, in our reality, put the scoop of ice cream through the bottom point of the cone. It is not big enough, as it is the smallest point, and it is used to support the rest of the cone, so it can then hold the ice cream, much like the past is constructed to support to the present and future. But if you were theoretically able to calculate not only the start of the cone, but were able to witness or comprehend the cone to also extend backward into the past, like the shape of an hourglass, you begin to graph the time and existence leading up to the cone and beyond.
I have an incomplete thought forming in my head, but apparently, not apparently. What I mean, like, is you can't put ice cream in the bottom of the cone, right? Picture your entire life as a cone of ice cream, right? You got this cone. We're trying to fit this moment right here into that ice cream or into the cone. You can't really put it through the bottom uh, because it's now. It's built up in this moment. We can only add more into the top because all your history is back here. This was the foundation, the cone that holds all your ice cream. Um, there's more to that, but I just enjoyed that visual and that metaphor. But then again, the whole history behind that, everything that existed before the cone expands before that, leading up to the moment of the cone's creation, and then the creation. It's all everything else, and then you exist, and now you're up here filling yourself with ice cream and other things.
Your individual superpositional starting point in time of your branch of sequences within the func also extends as a string chain of branches, possible loops in all directions before and after your existence, and eventually both larger sides of the hourglass connect through the string chain of branches loops and continues extending seemingly forever, while also beginning again or perhaps even stopping, but at different superpositional points of connection in time and space. And each point in that sequence within our experienced func branches is now, with technology, more easily calculable, recordable, and relayable, and we are potentially able to draw a connecting line from one point in fourth dimension or even func time and space to another. As I said before, the starting point of your superpositional Carvanial sequence, branching out in all directions and in each and every moment in time, someone or something else's 4D-like and beyond metaphorical hourglass spine begins and expands, just as yours does, while having already expanded from the past. And all that data is becoming easier to store and equate. And it goes around and round, always moving forward from the backwards into time and space. March 22nd, 2024. And when you and or the ice cream cone are gone, the spinal branches of each may possibly be at their individual endpoints of physical form, but the influence of from their beings or soul continues expanding with every remaining expanding point, spine, influence, funk, etc. forever. Why doesn't this data make more sense to me, us, you ask? If all these patterns of knowledge and experience are here and there and are now observable and more easily shared and understandable, or if not, now increasingly more accessible to that understanding or achieving, then why am I or we still confused about it? This is a part of learning. March 23rd, 2024. Imagine buying a book or a video game and right after you started it, you were able to instantly reach the end and finish it. Would that be enjoyable? Compressing the entire story and emotional journey one would hope to experience, what would you learn, retain from that point? Or if you watched it only from the first episode of a series and then the last episode, you could only assume what happened in between. I think that is why it is important that we must experience all of reality and beyond as funk so that we can know and understand what funk was. The
uh, as a side note, if you enjoy comedy and everything, shout out to Honey I Shrunk the Binge, where basically they take like series and they watch the first episode and then the last episode, and then they discuss on what they believe happened in between and everything. Very very funny, very entertaining.
feelings that you are currently experiencing and others are understanding to be are parts confusion, understanding, and more, and all of your instinctual feelings are results of your individual internal selfishness, gathered, challenged, and expanded from your nurturing and nurturing external selflessness. You're our inner and outer influences and beyond. It is important to be selfish to a manageable degree in order for our individual branches of time, experience and understanding, and data collection to exist and continue attempting to exist. Each of our selfishnesses guides us, and in some ways it sometimes distracts us from selflessness, while also being influenced by and sometimes leading us to selflessness. And it is when those points meet that two or more selfish identities are able to connect and expand off each other or not. Consider two parallel lines that never meet. It is in their selfish natures to keep expanding in both directions and to continue expanding and taking up the space they each exist in. And as they get longer and longer, they become larger parallel lines, but they are also still just two similar parallel lines that never touch or meet or perhaps even know of each other's existence. Now, say these lines are currently parallel, but also expanding selflessly inside and out of themselves in every direction of points in space, eventually crossing each other outside and inside of their selfish paths. Their selfish and selfless interactions paint a much larger picture than just those two lines that never met. Now picture these parallel lines as individual people. They can, with choice or not, move forwards, backwards, sideways, diagonally, etc., communicate with each other or not, know of each other or not, and their points of existence are able to interact at an infinite amount of points across time and space.
What's kind of the picture that's painting in my mind right now is like, let's say through time and space, you have two parallel lines, right? And they're just lines. They're like, okay, we're cool. We exist next to each other. We never have to, interact. You got your space. I got my space. Cool beans. We exist. But as time and space warps and everything, these lines, uh, even though uh, it's all kind of perspective. It might appear like this over time. It might cross over. Now they're still parallel, but just because of the way perspective and time and space shift and change, now it's interacting. Now they're across each other. What do they do with these moments? What does all do? What does one do? Now that one and two have interacted, what does three do around it? What does three and four and five and six and seven and eight? What do they all do? How do they handle this? And what is right, what is wrong? Because we're trying to give these things names and stuff, but in funk reality, they're just going to happen, and they're just going to do, and they're just going to react the ways that they do.
Okay.
And that is up to page 40. Let's see and hear Caryn's thoughts now.
Let's get into this. First of all, it is a very good idea to read this, hear it out loud. Might not be able to understand or take away from this, but I actually do a lot of voice acting. And I was also a commercial script writer at one point, and there were a lot of times when I was given something to read that was not read out loud, and once the person wrote it, heard it out loud, they made a lot of changes. You
Yeah.
really do need to hear the written word spoken out loud, even if it may never be spoken out loud, because a lot of ideas do gel that way. So this is a very good thing to be doing.
Correct. And also well read. Very well read. I can see why you do voice acting.
Second, it's very dense. With it being a treatise, I guess it could be dense like a textbook. Um, Not knowing what it was going into it, it took me a minute to find the voice, find the cadence, because I had no description of what I was taking on. Very interesting subject, by the way. My two biggest takeaways um, run on sentences. I counted several that went on to 5 or 6 lines.
Hell yeah, brother.
And when you try to make so many points in one sentence, you lose track of what was being addressed, what was being said in the very beginning.
Some people do. Some people
Especially
don't.
when you end up using a lot of punctuation, a lot of parentheses.
Yeah.
And
And I get that. I that is something that hopefully with the future these translations are able to get help and help me become a better writer and a better translator on how to do that. What you're seeing here is what I my abilities. These are the abilities that I have at this present moment, and so I am hearing you, and I do agree, because it's definitely going to help people. Just like we talked about earlier, some people are going to see those run-on sentences and just put it down, and the goal for this is trying to build something that is engaging, and calls for you to engage in some way and be beyond just dismissing it. Which again, I say a million times, that is still okay and still a part of it and still necessary to help us reach each next month.
And also, for the eye, it's easier to break down points and ideas in smaller paragraphs. So that's something to keep in mind. But the run-on sentences were problematic. The ideas need to be condensed. And ironically, I found the sentences were shorter when you were talking about math. So there may be a connection there.
Uh, but also, uh, as someone who likes to read philosophy, um, it is very common to just have these huge run on sentences because you're trying to explain these difficult concepts, and these formats arise. But again, the goal is to learn how to give better TLDRs for the people who need them. Put it in layman's terms as well as non-layman's terms. I want it to be able to be understood in every language by anything and everything. I want to be able to show it to a rock, and the rock be like, "Hell yeah!"
And another thing, um, the slashes, dashes, several, starting on page 31, futures, past, pasts into, across infinity. Another on page 36, objectively, subjectively. On 38, explore, experience, expand. On page 40, a string, chain of branches, possible loops. It could be that you're still working on this and these are placeholders for the ideas you're trying to convey. But if you intend to actually keep this, um, that's it's too much. It's too broad. It's too broad of an idea. And there were some passages where I was just doing nothing but reading if and or but, I, you, him, the funk. You There either needs a different way to express this, or you need to go ahead and choose your voice.
See, but that's the difficulty of describing something that is so broad because there's not a word besides funk that means all of these things. But if I just said funk, you wouldn't really know each individual word that I was trying to get you to resonate with in these. And again, yes, kind of some of them are placeholders. And a lot of them are just that, this concept of like I'm putting all these words with slashes, which means all of these things, and there's not a word that really does all these things that also doesn't help explain all of these things. And that's just the fun of language and everything, and also talking with such a broad thing. Sorry to pause your face.
And decide on which voice you are using for this. But other than that, very interesting reading. I liked the points, and I think you have something good here. Good
Thank you,
luck.
thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you again, Caryn, for reading pages 31 through 40. Thank you for doing what you do and existing. Thank you, the watcher and the reader, for doing what you do and existing. I love you. And the funk provides. I will see you next time. I guess I don't have anything else to say. So I guess I'll just naturally close it off here. All right. See ya.